question from Kieran O'Hara.
Will the Conservative Party be changed by the benefits and the constraints of coalition government? And if so, how are we going to be able to tell the Conservative Party and the Liberal Democrats apart in 2015?
We've been 5 or 6 weeks in, we haven't had the budget, we haven't had the spending review, and everyone's getting used to, or the ministers getting used to their red boxes, and it's very difficult to say. For my part, having fought the Liberal Democrats hard in Salisbury and had some very interesting exchanges over the course of that, I mean, I see the identity of the Conservative Party very much in the government more than I see the Liberal Democrats. I mean, I think it's a fundamentally Conservative government, and I think there's a very clear narrative going into the next election for me, which is that some of the political reforms, some of those things that perhaps we've been we would do on if we had plenty of time in a second or third term, have been brought forward, being done by the Liberal Democrats. But the fundamental thrust of public service reform, of sorting out the debt and all the rest of it, is actually fundamentally Conservative. And I am happy with the coalition. This is what the country wanted. We live with it. But to my mind, there is a very clear identity in this government that is a Conservative government that's fundamentally about dealing with public finance challenges. And we will have an offer to the public that will be very different to the Liberal Democrats, and they aren't very comfortable with it, as some elements of our party aren't. It will be not as smooth as it all seems now. Let's see where we are in 6 months' time.
The way I see the coalition is that the dynamic between the two new intakes is actually very positive, surprisingly positive. You have this sort of shared view that we've had big government authoritarianism for far too long in this country, and we got to deal with it. We've got to roll back the frontiers of the state, roll back all this interference, ID cards, databases, DNA watch, and all the rest of that side of things. And you have this sort of, the new intake is like a new generation that's sort of grown up, that has an idea about how the country should be, and it doesn't include having government size 9s all over the place. And that, to my mind, is probably the strongest glue of the coalition. Authoritarian government is out of fashion. And the, dare I say, the sort of Whiggish side of the Conservative party thinking, and the sort of liberalism of the Liberal Democrat side of thinking kind of unites quite strongly around that agenda. And I think that helps stabilise it. Because on the side of the economics, which is the most important side of things, everyone knows we've got to deal with the deficit. Everyone knows you can't stick your head in the sand, and it seems to me, my impression at least, is the Liberal Democrats are as much up for that and taking the difficult decisions that need to be taken as we are. And then purely in the dynamics of this government, you then think, well, what's the risk? The risk is the Liberals decide to walk out. Well, why would they? This is the first time that they've had a chance to be in government for nearly a century. Instead of being a perennial opposition party on the sidelines, suddenly they have a voice at the centre of our national life. Suddenly they are ministers. So if you're on the payroll side of the Liberal Democrats, you're thinking, this is wonderful. I actually get to decide something. I have a chance to be part of the process. If you're on the new intake side of the Liberal Democrats, you're thinking, this is wonderful. We get to roll back the states, and we quite get on with these Tories because they share a sort of similar worldview. And I think we do in many ways. And if you're one of the sort of 10 Liberal Democrats that is neither new intake nor on the payroll, then you're probably feeling a bit fed up. But I would point out, it takes 35 government MPs to rebel to remove the majority. So I think the electoral mass actually is with this coalition, and I think the public quite like it. It's almost like having a national government to sort out our nation in times of crisis. It's really positive.
I think that when we set about cutting public expenditure, we want to see the benefit of being able to deliver the services that the public need to at least the same, if not a better standard, for less money. And I'll just give you a practical example of what I mean by that. I mean, local authorities around the country are in a state of fear over the reduction in their budgets. And there will be pain, and the pain will be, I think, suffered by individuals who are sadly made redundant in order to reduce costs. But the service, which will transfer into the third sector, be it not-for-profit or voluntary, will be maintained. And some of those people who lost their jobs will gain employment, perhaps at a lower income, but they will keep providing services with the voluntary sector that can be provided with so much more passion and so much greater commitment than many services that are currently provided by government. And that's where I feel we see some opportunity, the opportunity that dare not speak its name in a way, from the spending reductions in terms of liberating the third sector to do so much more for people than is possible under the present monolithic, centralised government delivery force. That's how I'd answer your particular question.
The good news, coming to it sort of from a business perspective, is when you're going to bring two companies together or two parties together in this case, is if you don't deal with the difficult questions up front, then it's very likely to fail because the cracks begin to show at the first sign of crisis. And I think from what I saw from our side is we dealt with the tough questions up front. Not all of them, but some of the really big issues. On the big idea...
Sorry, did John wants to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I just, excuse me, I mean, I think the issue is that, in theory, you're right, but when have the Liberal Democrats, as a national party of government, ever had to go through the sort of pain that we anticipate is necessary? And it's actually dealing with that reality. And I just wonder how it'll all work out when we have to take responsibility for those tough decisions.
And that's still to be put to the test. You're absolutely right, because at the moment the nation likes it as well.
Yeah.
But they haven't had to go through the pain yet. Now, what I think is the good news is on the big idea, which is essentially we had 13 years of a government that came in and thought the way to sort out our hospitals and our schools is to have big departments of Whitehall, central command and control, big spending on it when we had money to spend, and that's how you fix all our public services. And the big idea is that we shift decision-making locally on police and councils and hospitals and everything else. Now, that, as I said earlier, that's a massive idea. The good news is they completely buy into that. That is something that they absolutely share with us. Now, it's all, the devil will be in the implementation of all this stuff.
Laura, can I just ask you quickly,
Yes.
on the Lib Dem question, how will it change the Conservative Party? Is it possible to be in bed with these guys for 5 years and not to catch something?
I mean, I want to go back to what John was saying. I mean, both of us were, during the election, the Lib Dems and the Conservatives were saying change, and we were trying to out-change each other. And actually, it was the public that out-changed us all and said, hey, there's the two of you, you better get together and sort yourselves out. So they, in many ways, chose the nature of change that we're having to deal with, which might not have been quite in our plan. So it was what was voted for. In many ways, if you look at the Conservative Party, and particularly now, because we've got 90 more members of Parliament, these are coalitions, all parties are. And what we've done is we've strapped another coalition off on the end, right? Now, some of them are very, very sort of, very thin line that you've got to move quite far to, not so much to the left, but within the very older-fashioned liberal tradition. And I'm not sure that, I mean, we think, and I think there's been a lot of commentary about the fact that the Liberal Democrats give us cover when it comes to making very difficult decisions. So we look like the cosy Conservative Party rather than, the
Nasty party.
The nasty party. Actually, I think that for some Liberal Democrats, we give them cover. And there are a couple of conversations I've had with some Liberal Democrats who sort of say, well, we always knew we were going to have to do these. I mean, we always knew we were never going to be in government, but now we are. In our dreams, we always knew we would have to make cuts if we were in government. In a strange way, you are giving us cover to be able to, in many ways, support it.